Hey, it's Lee. Welcome to Business Problem Solving. Today is, I guess, a special episode. Episode 200. The podcast has been going now for just over 4 years. We've reached 200 episodes, and it is with absolute great pleasure that I introduce the guest today, Mr. Jim Longton. Welcome to Business Problem Solved, and episode 200. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Lee. Good morning. How's everything with you?
Yeah, all very good. Thank you very much. All very good. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. We've connected on LinkedIn. We've had a few conversations, and what I'm really keen to understand, really, I guess first and foremost, is for those people who don't know who Jim is, who is Jim, and how has he got to that seat today?
Well, fine. Okay. Good morning again. Well, I left school at 16 years old, and started an apprenticeship. And during the actual apprenticeship years, it was I sort of realized that there were much better ways of doing things in terms of the interactions between management and supervision and your fellow workers, etc. And so, but just a bit of background before that, I left school at 16 years old with one O level. I had a GCSE in woodwork. I had a pretty uneventful academic start to my life, and it was, and in fact, although it was only diagnosed many years later, I was dyslexic. Now, back in 1965, when I was 16 years old, dyslexia wasn't really recognized. It wasn't discussed. Anyone with dyslexia was normally put down as just being disruptive, impossible to control, etc., etc. So that's sort of that's the way I left school. Managed to get an apprenticeship because in those days, jobs were plentiful, and particularly apprenticeships. I mean, manufacturing was a major part of the economy, significantly more than it is today. So that's just quickly how I started. And so during my apprenticeship, I started as a general engineer apprentice, and I didn't like it. But my father, he was an engineer, time served guy, and he was insistent that I was going to get an apprenticeship, get a trade under my belt, and I had to stick it out. Now, the first year, as I say, I was doing a general engineering apprenticeship. Well, most of the first year, and then an opportunity arose for me to specialize immediately because the company wanted an apprentice pattern maker. Now, you may not understand about pattern making, but it's a foundry trade. It's akin to, it's in the same level in the hierarchy of the engineering trades as tool maker. So tool makers and pattern makers are side by side. And it also, in a way, it appealed to my woodworking sort of only skill, as it were, because I hadn't got a clue what pattern making was about. But someone said to me, I was one of my co-workers, said, look, this job's come up and they're wanting it now. You've got to go now because it's not a general job. It's a specialized job. You've got to go and do it for 5 years. Why don't you go and talk to the foreman in the shop? So I went down to see him because pattern shops were either always in the basement and cellar of a building or in the attic. They were never mainstream. It was always like a necessary evil. Yeah. So I went down to see the pattern shop, and I walked in and I was like completely amazed. It was like a revelation to me, this whole woodworking activity going on in this huge engineering company. I was one of 40 apprentices taken. The day I started, I was one of 40 apprentices, and that went on year after year after year. 1,000 people worked in the company, major company manufacturing printing presses. And I was blown away by this, and I was walking around, and I mean, when you're looking at patterns being made, it's like furniture. They're absolutely beautiful. They're works of art. So I started in the pattern shop, and lo and behold, part of the apprenticeship program was you had to go to college. And I went to Bolton. I'm from Chorley. It was handy. I was working in Preston. I used to get the train to, and we started doing 1 day a week and one night. So you did a full day, and then you stayed on and did night school. So it was a long day. You know, you'd start at whatever time it was, 8:30 in the morning. You didn't finish till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. So it was a long day. But that was the first time that I actually got into and enjoyed education. Yeah. I was a sponge. I was soaking up everything. And I did it was a 4-year course altogether, finishing when I was 21 years old, coincided with the completing my apprenticeship. And lo and behold, I was getting credits and distinctions and everything. I was just absolutely blown away by it. And so what happened then, at the end of it, I got the opportunity to go on to and do a higher national diploma. And I wanted to do this, and I'll explain the reasons why in a moment. But the problem was you had to do a bridging course because the 4 years I'd done, I wasn't at sufficient level in terms of maths, chemistry, physics, etc. Because normally the entrance to the course was A level, and so I was short of this because I didn't have formal A levels. Yeah. So I did the course, and it was what it was called a bridging course. Lasted about 4 months, and I got through that, and then I started on the high national diploma. And basically, at the time, the high national diploma was 6 months in college and 6 months in work, and the work had to be related to the course. That went on for 3 years, and then there was a further year of part-time study to complete 1 or 2 endorsement subjects. So I'd gone through this period of my apprenticeship and then realized that there was definitely a better and different way of doing things than what I'd gone through. And to me, it was archaic, the way that people spoke to each other, the way that management reacted and supervisors, etc. And in fact, I was offered the opportunity when I was 18 and 19 to be sponsored by the trade union to go and do a trade union course to become a trade union official, which I turned down because really I was thinking that if I could get a qualification, I can actually get out of just being, I'm not saying this in any derogatory way, but being a tradesman, to be able to do something more that I could influence things. Yeah. And that was really my driving force. I actually went down to Ford at Dagenham as a pattern maker for a few weeks after I completed my apprenticeship, trying to get sponsorship to go on the HND because you needed, it was like you're on your own. So anyway, that didn't work out because they didn't know me long enough, and they really wanted pattern makers. They didn't want students. That's basically what it was. Anyhow, so I started, and the first year I got the placement I got. I got this job in Ashton in Makerfield near Wigan, and the first 6 months, and it was a large company, and they had 3 foundries operations, very large press shops, a lot of stamping and pressing, packaging, painting. It was a whole integrated company for making the full product from start to finish, including painting, packing, sales, etc. Worldwide sales, and so the first year basically was just like a training year, messing about, seeing things, and I realized pretty quickly that, well, maybe this was the sort of norm because I didn't feel any different doing this job than when I was an apprentice in terms of the style or the system, the way it went. And I went back to college after that 6 months, and then they actually called me back and said, look, you did your 6 months ago with us, and we'd like you to come back. So I said, oh, okay. And that really was the start of my sort of journey, if you want to call it that, because I went back and I was working then directly for the foundry manager. So I was, and I was getting involved and seeing what was going on with industrial relations and incentive schemes and piecework and bonus schemes and etc. And I did 6 months doing all that and learning a lot of technical things as well, back to college. And then 6 months later, they said, look, we'd like you to come back again and consider joining us full time. Because then the last 6 months was, you had to do your last 6 months industrial training, and then you got a job, your qualification. So I did that. And during that time, they also then sent me down to a huge operation in Kent called GKN Kent Alloys, which was a very, very large foundry group. And lo and behold, it was exactly the same there. I mean, it was like, is this the norm? This must be the norm, the way of doing things.
Yeah. So,
And
Jim, when you say is this the norm, what was happening? How were people being?
well, don't forget, this was the 1970s. And the 1970s was a terrible, terrible decade in terms of turmoil within the, within the country, with what's known now referred to as the winter of discontent, which was when Margaret Thatcher was elected, the Conservative government in 1979. And that really brought to the end this decade. And I say, was that the norm? In fact, it had been, because the origins of what happened during the 1970s were really in the way people had been treated and the way that workers were treated. And what we saw in the 1970s was a culmination, I believe, of all this pressure building up over the years, probably since the end of the Second World War. Then we had the nationalisation, Labour governments, and it was a lot of people were working for the state because the government was funding huge numbers of industries, but the management just had this attitude, the Theory X attitude. If any of you have read The Human Side of Enterprise by Douglas McGregor, that was it. It was pervasive everywhere. People came to work. You had a job to do. Clock on, do your job, clock off, and go home. We're not interested in anything you've got to say. We don't want to involve you. You'll do what you're told to do. And the systems that were put in place to try and control this, with the incentive schemes, bonus schemes, piecework, and all this sort of thing, were really geared at just keeping people working. And so any issue that, even minor issues that arose, immediately led to disputes. And the 1970s was characterized. We became known as the sick man of Europe. We were strikes. There were days, weeks and weeks and weeks of strikes in all sectors. I mean, the start of it was the miners in 1973, before the pit closures and all that program started later on. And so the workers reacted to this system, and the managers and the leaders couldn't see it. I mean, it was like, and it was absolutely a them and us situation. And so, talk about change and introducing change, absolutely everything was treated as suspicion. We're not cooperating. It was demarcation, one man, one job, one man, one machine, and this went all the way through the 70s. And I was involved in all this, and I started to make changes during the 1970s, because by the time I sort of finished college and I got my job, and then I got promoted. I started off as a foreman, and then I became a superintendent, and then eventually in that company I became the works not the works manager, but the general foundry manager of the foundry departments. And I started then to realize that you needed to work with people, you needed to talk to people, include them. If you wanted to change things, normally, if you wanted to change things, it was to improve them. You don't change things to make things bad, but it was always we're not changing. No, there's nothing wrong with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I introduced then what I call the participation committee, and this was like very radical in the company, because, well, what do you mean? What are you going to do? How are they going to participate? Well, I want to discuss things with them, and when we're going to make a change, I want to sit them down and talk to them and make sure they're on board, and any issues they've got. Well, it doesn't matter what issues they've got. No. You don't. This is weakness. You don't do this. You get in there and you tell them what to do. That's the way we do this. And I said, well, I disagree, because at the end of the day, we end up with disputes and stoppages, and we go right back to where we were before, because you gave in, and this was typical. And because I'd seen it certainly when I served my apprenticeship, that my 10 years that I spent with GK in Ashton Makerfield, on the secondment when I went to Kent Alloys, and even in my brief period at Ford. You don't believe this, but when I started at Ford, I went down, I had an interview with the personnel department, huge company, Ford, Dagenham. And I got the job because they wanted patent makers. And I had to go down. I went down on the train from Preston, carrying a huge toolbox on wheels, all this sort of thing. No car, no driving. And I got to the pattern shop to start on the Monday morning, and the manager of the pattern shop, and he was a big pattern shop, said, "Oh, like before you start, you've got to go and see the shop steward, and before he'll approve you to start." And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I've got the job, I'm taking on personnel department." Yeah, okay, I know what the personnel department are doing, but I've got to make sure that this shop runs. And if the shop steward doesn't accept you, you won't be starting. And I said, "Well, for what reason?" He said, "Well, first of all, you're a member of the union, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a member of the union. I'm a member of the pattern makers union." And you've got all your tools. I've got all my tools. And right, well, he needs to see you, because they will not let you start unless they're convinced that you've, number one, served your apprenticeship and you are a tradesman, because if you're not a tradesman, you're not working here. And you'll want to see all your tools to make sure that you've got all the tools that a tradesman has, because if you only come with a hammer and a chisel, that's no good. Well, I've got my toolbox with me. And then the other thing, of course, is you had to be up to date with all your union dues. And so I went to see the shop steward. I don't know his last name. He was called Dennis, a short little guy he was. Really efficient. It was almost like, I was thinking, what? Am I one of you? What? And that was it. And yeah, I got through that. I mean, obviously, I passed it. Yeah. Fine, okay, you're accepted. You can start. He went to see the manager and said, "It's okay. Yeah, Jim can start." And I'm thinking, and this was in 1970, right? And look what happened to Ford. I mean, and all the industrial relations problems they had after that. And that was a tiny part of it, but that was right at the beginning of the 70s. And this got worse as the 70s went on. And so I had, I wouldn't say I had a huge amount of success, but when I left that company at the end of the 1970s, and I left in 1979, certainly the areas that had been under my control were a lot happier. They were better. They were more productive. People would come and discuss a problem with you rather than say, "Right, stop, that's it, we're not working, we're stopping." I mean, strikes used to take place just like that. I mean, the shop steward would come in and say, "We're out, we're going out now." And it was unbelievable. I mean, everyone just stopped.
Yeah. What gave you the confidence to try something different and to challenge the norm?
Well, the main I say that the confidence, number one, I was absolutely convinced and certain that things had to change, because if it didn't, it was just ridiculous to carry on like this. Number two, because I wasn't your typical manager. I mean, back in the 70s and the 60s, someone from my background would never ever end up in the positions that I've had over my career. I mean, probably the best you could hope for would be to become the foreman or the superintendent. And it was all based on, on practical skills, being able to show the men what to do, being able to teach the men what to do. And there was this barrier. It was this invisible barrier. Oh, well, first of all, he failed his 11 plus. He didn't go to grammar school. He didn't go to university. He's not really from the right background, and this pervaded. This was constant throughout. You never got on. Lads like us never made it, up the chain. And I think the guys, even though then I was, by this time, when I left, I was the founding manager. They realized that I was like, really, or you can almost say one of them. I wasn't sort of, some silver spoon guy. And I understood them, because I understood the fears and the problems and the issues they had and what they were trying to do and their home lives and all the important things that we tend to forget when someone comes to work. Look, clock on, leave your brain in that box at the door, and just bring your hands and your muscles. And then when you go home, you can collect your brain on the way out and go home, and nothing will happen to it. It's secure. No one's going to interfere with it. It's okay. And so when you do start talking to them, and the things that you want to do, you explain to them. and explain why it's important, why it may, why you want to do it, the effect it's going to have on the business, on them. I mean, things like making the job easier. I did a huge amount of work on take because it was a real physical job. And these guys were like, these are ex-miners in the Wigan coalfield. But these weren't pussies. These were tough guys, But it was almost as though, well, if we're paying them a wage, they've got to work hard. And if you make their life easier, you've got to reduce the pay or reduce the numbers. And that was the format. I mean, that was the whole part of the function of the work study department, time and motion. And so when I was working with them and saying, look, we'll do this, and I put a whole monorail system in for distributing the metal. And then, the finance guys would say, well, what's the payback on this? But I said, well, there's several paybacks. I said, number one, it's a lot easier. So we're not going to keep losing guys the way we, going because it's just so physically hard work. Number two, we're going to get improvements in quality because of the whole number of technical reasons in terms of metal temperature loss, and all this sort of thing. And also it will enable us to reduce to a certain extent, to reduce the level of inventory in between the times when you make it to pour it and get it through the system. And so it was begrudgingly accepted. But the transformation in the industrial relations atmosphere changed completely. By the time I left in 79, the last 2 or 3 years, I think we'd only had 2 actual stoppages, disputes in the areas I was running, and they were tied into national issues, not company issues. These were the unions flexing their muscles. Right, we're going on strike now. Everybody in the engineering workers union will be on strike on Monday, and so it was that type of situation. So I think the confidence I had, I gained my confidence, and I knew when I started I was right, and I knew if I could do it and get a go at it, I'd change things. And by the time I left in 1979, I was very, very confident. I knew, I knew how I could do things, how I could change things, how I could work with people, and then really that was the next phase of my life. The 1970s, I call it my baptism of fire. It was like, unless you were there, I mean, everyone says, oh yeah, we all remember the 1970s. No, you don't. I mean, you've got to be I'm 73. I started my management career at 21 when I started at college and doing all my industrial training. And so I was 21. So you've got to be to really understand what was going on. As teenagers and kids, you really didn't understand what was going on in the 1970s. But when you were working it, when you were in the middle of it, you knew. And that period of time was honestly, I mean, any of the older people who may listen to this podcast, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, he's right. He's absolutely right."
Yeah.
And then the 1980s, then was the transformation. Really, was the transformation period. I got a job then. I moved and got the job with a company in Todmorden. It was called Simon Warman then, and it became Warman International, and now it's Weir Minerals. It's still there. It's still thriving. A very, very successful company. And I was very fortunate because the managing director, Paul Morgan, he was old school, ex-public school officer in the army. He lost his foot blown off with a mine in Italy during the Battle of Monte Cassino. I mean, he was the real. He understood people. And talking to me during the interview process, it tweaked. He said, I'm fully support your views on things on this, and I really would like you to join us. And so I started there. 1979 it was, and true to his word, he said, just like, I want to be kept informed, obviously, because it was the hierarchical system was there. He was the managing director. He didn't go and see the managing director because he had his board of directors and his managers. So you were dealing with the problem area. The problem area in all this isn't the guys on the shop floor. because the guys on the shop floor, once you can get through to them, and once you start talking, will welcome this with open arms. Once you can get rid and eliminate the suspicion, once they trust you, once they realize that you can talk, that they can talk to you and you listen to them, there's no problem at all. You're pushing at an open door. It's wide open. You don't have to do anything. And the problem is always middle management who, ooh, hang on, we're under threat here. You can't be anything. We tell the guys what to do. We're the experts. They've got to do what they're told. You can't have these guys doing it. What about us? They felt insecure because suddenly things start changing, and then managing director said, well, hang on, what have you guys been doing for the last 150 years? Why didn't this happen before? So the big fear was always in the middle management, and not at foreman level, because the foreman, they were just one of the guys being paid a bit more because they were a bit smarter. I mean, I always used to find it really strange when the best guy on the shop floor doing a job, or even anywhere, bricklaying, whatever you want, the best bricklayer was always made the foreman or the best fitter. And then you lose your best bricklayer and your best fitter, because then the guy said, oh no, he's a foreman now. He can't touch the tools. No, they can't touch the tools. It's got to be. And so it was crazy. What you really need is the best leader, or the guy that. And later on, as I developed my sort of the way my working practice, I always had to include the union guys, a shop steward or whatever, because if you didn't, they would be immediately suspicious that you were trying to undermine them. But the people I selected, or were asked to select, were not the sort of the stars. I wanted the people, the ones who were always talking to everybody else. There's always this. They don't want to. They always talk. They've got all the ideas. They don't want to be the foreman. They don't want to be the shop steward. But they're there under, not undermining everything, but they're the opinion that all the guys seek. They don't go to the shop steward. They don't. And say, hey, Bill, what about this? Well, listen, and it's like, if he was suspicious, it didn't happen. If he said, I know what you're thinking, but look, I think we should give it a go, this, because they'll do it. Yeah. And so it's that sort of a guy I want. And they're the ones I sort out, not the superstars. And so and I managed to start this in the beginning of as I said, the 1980s. And I made, I shouldn't say it, we made incredible progress. Once I got the suspicion out of the way and we started looking at it, we modified the incentive schemes, which basically they just didn't work. We introduced new technology without any problems. We had some issues in the machine shops when we wanted one man to run two machines, because that was like, back then, that was like, no way. It was like you needed garlic hanging on the back of the door to keep that one out. But eventually we managed to do it. And it was really when we started to introduce CNC that it became, even the guys accepted it. But you see, the thing was, the attitude then was, one man, one machine. If you want me to run two machines, I want his wages.
Yeah.
So I'll do it, but I want two wages. If you want me to run three machines, I want three wages. And this always stopped it all the time, So that was difficult to get through, but we did. By the time I left, we were in several areas, not everywhere, because it's like, you can't say I want one man to run two machines, because you can't do it. There are areas where one man can run two machines, or even three machines. And so we got that in by the time, And so that whole company was transformed in terms of the levels of work in progress, in terms of deliveries, quality. I mean, throughput times just absolutely tumble from weeks and weeks and weeks. We were getting pumps out within 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And before, they were giving deliveries of 14 weeks, 15 weeks. I mean, some of the larger ones took longer, but I mean, it was a huge, huge improvement that we collectively. Yeah. The good thing about that was, you see, by the time I got to by the time I was leaving, I was in charge of HR. So HR reported to me. It wasn't, so they reported to me, and I kept that under control. The work study reported to me, the machine shops, all the operations, and that's where the issues are. They're not in the office with the accountants and the sales guys and the admin people. The problems, the issues, the improvements that can be made are right down there where the work's going on, where you do it. And so, and that was it. And as a result of that, that was like my second, and I was then.
So I'm going to say, just a quick question, Jim, before we move on to your I guess your third stage. If knowing what you know now, what one piece of advice would you given to yourself coming out of your second stage of your career?
Well, I think the advice I would give to myself really is that it all depends on what's gone before. Because you could have tried this and failed absolutely miserably not because of any of your own ability or your own belief system, because of what was above you, the block, the stop. And so I think the advice I would give anyone now starting on this journey is that if you're going to change jobs, you need to get some success under your belt. Now, when you've done that, move for opportunities. Thinking back, that's what I've always done. I've never actually. I was talking to my wife the other day. I've never left a job for more money. I've never gone down there. Oh, look at this! They're paying this much more. I can do that job. I'll apply for it. I've never done that. I've always thought of, well, there's an opportunity here to carry on doing what I'm doing. No, obviously, I'm not going to work for nothing.
Yeah.
But I've never ever simply just chased higher and higher and higher salaries, because if you do that, you end up in situations in companies where that's all that matters, and they treat the people in exactly the same way. If they don't perform, they get fired. It's not a matter of, well, how can we improve the performance? No, if they can't do it, get shut of them. There's plenty more. We get somebody else in.
Yeah.
And so in terms of, that's, and ever since then, really, since that sort of that's the end of my second phase, if you want, of my career. I've always done that. I've always looked for opportunities, or if opportunities have come along, I've assessed it in terms of, well, what can I do? What can I do? I know I'm very highly qualified and very, very capable. Technically, I can do every job in my industry. But that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about getting everybody else to do the job, pulling all that knowledge out of everybody that works for you. I mean, my last job, I had 1,800 people.
Yeah.
I was responsible for in different sites. And so imagine that, 1,800 brains, 1,800 contributions to what you're trying to do. If you just free them up, I mean, imagine the power there.
Wow. Yeah.
And this was always missed, you see. No. Just we all want to work. Just work. We don't want this. We don't want the brains. Yeah. It's dangerous. Work. All we want you to do is work. And so that really, that's what I would say in terms of where I was at the end of the when I entered the third phase, which was the most really the most satisfying and exciting and rewarding part, I would say, of my of my career. Yeah. So at the end of the 1980s, I was headhunted to join a large company in the steel foundry business. It was a company that was rapidly developing due to a large program of acquisitions. And I got a call from a headhunter and got chatting to him. And and they had this job, which I really, I suppose, immediately saw then as another opportunity, because I was being recruited not because of my, if you want to call it, HR abilities, or the success I've had with people, as it were, over the last previously 10 years. I was being recruited because I had, a reputation in terms of a technical reputation and a manufacturing reputation. So the job I was offered and accepted was the combined role of technical director and operations director. It was a dual role because they were going through a huge reorganization or consolidation process, and so I accepted that job, and it's to say it was a challenge. I mean, it was a huge challenge because the operation had well, I mean, the first thing that sort of hit me when I was going around was, number one, the huge amount of work in progress now. Okay, now it depends. That may be an old term that people use, or inventory. Well, it's what I regard. It's process inventory. So it's everything that's in process from, the first stage to the final stage before it. Well, including when it goes into the warehouse or dispatch. And there was like 14 weeks of work in progress. And this is in an industry where you're trying to probably offer deliveries of about, I suppose, 7-8 weeks would be acceptable. Back in those times, don't forget, this was like 1979, 1980. And so that was a huge issue. And of course, the industrial relations situation as well. And so really, and there was a lot of technical issues in terms of scrap. A lot of the work that was there waiting to be processed was going to be scrapped. There was all sorts of issues in terms of technical issues regarding the scrap, and that was really where my focus had to be initially, trying to get this level of work in progress down, because it was tying up vast amounts of cash. And also, when you're in a situation like that, you don't know you've got a problem until you do it. Now, if you start working on something that's been going through for 14 weeks and you find a problem, you've probably made another 14 weeks of problems. So that's where my focus was on this, not really on the sort of, the things I really wanted to do in terms of the industrial relations and the people involvement, etc., whatever you want to talk about. So the sort of first probably 18 months or so was spent really focused on this. And then as I started to make some inroads, by no means getting to where I wanted to be with that, but we started to get some procedures in terms of, quality control, and I relied heavily, quite a lot, on the work I'd done on quality circles earlier on in my, in the previous, when I was with the previous company. I'd done quality circles and team briefing, and it was good, but it was really, I was frustrated. I just didn't have the traction to really get, because I was firefighting all the time. That was the problem.
Yeah.
And things started to improve, and then I think that the major sort of time for me on this one, the light bulb moment, or whatever you want to call it, is that my MD called me in one day and said, "Look, I've been to a seminar with a guy called Sid Johnson, and I've invited him to come down and talk to the directors. And I think you're going to really find it interesting, because a lot of what we've and he was the MD was a switched on guy as well, is exactly what Sid's been talking about on these seminars that he's been running. And Sid Johnson came down and we talked to us, and I thought, wow, this here's, this is exactly what I've been looking for, because he was just saying all the things that I believed in. But the most important thing was his techniques and how he developed his techniques. I think someone in the meeting had said, "So what are your tricks?" And he said, "Tricks? No tricks. We don't talk about tricks, because if you start talking about tricks, you'll turn everybody off. This is not a trick. This is not a trick. These are techniques and tried and tested techniques." I think it was an accountant who said tricks. It wasn't anybody, typical accountant. Oh, what are the tricks to doing that? But anyhow, and so we agreed that we would run a series of workshops. Now, I mean, it was a large company with probably, I think, 720, I think it was, employees. Yeah. The bulk of those guys, people, on the shop floor with several different divisions. We were making about, the install capacity was probably about 17,000 tons a year. We never ever got to that, but we were making about between 400 and 420 tons a week. So you can imagine 14 weeks of work in progress, multiply that by 400, and you can imagine just how it was a big site, but you can imagine how much work there was around there. So we actually decided on that the best way to do it, talking with Sid, would be, because of the size of the business and the integration between all the different departments, because it was in process, step after step after step after step, one job and then the next, and move on to the next one and move on to the next one, until you finally got to the the end of the line. That really, to get all this integrated, we needed 5 workshops. And the way we did the workshops was that we arranged them for Saturday and Sunday. Well, the first thing, and I had with the MD, I said, look, the people we want to get on this, the first thing you say, well, we want you to come and onto this course, because that's what they called it. Yeah. On Saturday and Sunday. So I said, don't get into any arguments with them about saying it's going to be for their benefit already. Tell them you'll pay them overtime, because the first question that these guys will ask, the first question is, well, are we going to get paid for it? Yeah. And if you say, no, you're not. We're not going to pay you. We're going to improve you. We're going to make your life better, and you're going to enjoy coming to work. They say, well, you know what they say. It's too polite. I'm not going to say it on a podcast. So I said to the MD, before we even start, because that's the first question. I mean, and I don't even want them to ask it. I said, oh, by the way, you will be paid for doing this, because the first, so you preempt it. So we agreed that we paid them. And so there was no problem then in terms of the people that we selected, because what argument could they have? The only argument is, no, I don't want to work the free time. I don't want to work Saturdays, and I don't want to work Sundays. And in fact, that's not the case, because they work any bit of overtime they could get to get more money. So that wasn't the case. And the fact, and going to a hotel and stopping overnight, because everyone stayed overnight. And we made sure there was a pool table and darts and all this, all the sort of things for them to be paid for doing that. Woo, this was like amazing. So we arranged the five programs, and that's it. That's how we kicked off. And as I say, the techniques and Sid's enthusiasm and the way that he got people involved and interested in this, and the steps that we went through was absolutely, I was completely, to me, I felt, I've missed out on so, if I'd only known this when I've been struggling all the way in my way of doing things. I mean, the way I did things and the way Sid did things, it was exactly the same, but it was how he could do it. I mean, I was struggling to achieve it, and Sid, his techniques.
Yeah. What were some of them techniques that were different?
Well, it's the first of all, it's breaking down the barriers, because it's people are suspicious. If you, as a manager, as a director of the company, go in and start talking to people, say, we want to change things, and we're trying to make things a lot better, and we want to make sure that we can deliver sooner, and we want to improve our quality. They are suspicious because they think immediately, what more do they want us to do? It's us that, we're the ones, they know we're the ones that do this. So if they want to do all this, it means that we've got to do more. And this is where the suspicion is. And then, it comes, we can't do any more than we're doing. And it starts it. I mean, we're working hard enough. It is. They want us to work harder now, even harder. They want us to work. And so, the sort of, and the format I've used since, when we got the guys together, and as I said, there were 5 groups. There were probably maybe 25, I think, possibly in the groups, but they were mixed. So you'd have foremen, managers. There'll be a union representative always in there because they wanted to be in there. But the bulk of them were the guys, doing the job.
Yeah.
Molders, core makers, all the different processes that we had. And they weren't all in one department, because then you say, oh, well, it's the molding department that's got the problem. Because it's not. It's everybody's got the problem. And then so bringing in people from different areas where they'd never worked before, then talking about the common problems. This was, I think, no, but yeah, but we keep having to weld this hole up here. Well, that's it. We can fix that. No one ever told us. No one ever told us about that. That's simple. And so it was these sort of interactions that started taking place. And the way Sid kicked this off was that it was it was like, look, I want to talk to you about motivation in our group. What makes you do what you want to do? What helps you do what you want to do? What motivates you when you come to work? What motivates you? And so this is the starting off point, really, because of course money, the first. So you have a brainstorming. Right, come on, let's get everybody who sits writing everything down on the board, all the things. What motivates you? Well, the first thing is always money. Okay, I'll write money down. I used to write it in money in big letters on the thing. Anything else? Overtime. Oh, overtime, which is money. And then anything else? Well, and it was quiet then. He's thinking it was only money. No, come on. And so Sid would start to talk about different things. He related a lot of things to, one instance was like the First World War. And he said, how much would I have to give you for you to kill yourself? You see? Well, of course, no one would do that. No one. And so he relates. He's a very good storyteller. Relates, and he talked about Passchendaele, and the first time. Well, they introduced what they call Pals Brigades. The Chorley Pals were there.
Yeah.
The Pals Brigades, and very sinister, very, very sinister. The way that the psychologists that worked on this, they were really sinister guys. They realized that if they collected everybody from, let's say, I don't know, well, not the whole of Chorley, well, yeah, Chorley, as an example, and they put them all together in one battalion, one brigade, they all knew each other. They all knew each other's families, kids. They all, in those days, probably most of them worked within about 8 or 9 or 10 different places in Chorley, in different factories. So everybody knew everybody else. And they knew the streets. They knew everything. You put them in, stick them in a trench and say, right, lads, over the top. This is the leader. Over the top, lads. This is the leader at the back. I'm right behind you. Over the top. So, and they go charging forward. The first time that the British regiments had ever taken 90% casualties, because they went on into the machine gun fire. None of them would turn back. Previously, the highest number they'd ever had in this sort of trench warfare was probably 40%, maybe. And when that happened, they all legged it back. They ran. Of course they did. We're not having any more of this. It's 90%. And this was the sinister part of this was there's two very powerful motivators at work: pride and shame. None of them wanted to go back as the only one. If 90%, they didn't want to go back to Chorley and say, and they would say, well, what was the other 90%? Where are they? Oh, well, they're all dead. They all died. And that's psychology, you see. And so Sid then starts to bring these things in. I think I said, and I've used this technique so many times now. And so when you get them thinking about this pride and shame, and there's a whole bunch of things. And I mean, and the last time I did it, I did it with several groups, and then this is a sort of thing. I don't know if you can. This is a whole list of. I did a 5-day workshop. This was in a company in South Africa, actually. This one was, and I was running the company. So I've always been most successful when I've been calling all the shots. When I've got to report to a boss who you have to get permission to do what you want to do, that's always the problem, because unless he's switched on, it will never ever happen. And so this is not from one meeting. Everything I put on the board, I then put onto one list at the end of the week, and this was it.
Yeah.
And the point I made about this was that, okay, money's on there, nice and big money and overtime, etc., but it's limited. You can't keep giving money because there's only so much money. And if I give you money now, in a month or 2 months or 6 months, it's gone. It's no longer a motivator, because now you want your next lot of money. But all these other things that you've told me motivate you, all these things, religion, love, being safe, involvement, improvement, promotion, training, honesty, working conditions, all the things that they said will motivate me, are free.
Yeah.
And limitless. They're infinite. They can go on forever. There's no end to them. And those are, and you've got all those now. Now, money is important, but it's not. It's a very powerful motivator, but it's in very, very short supply. And so and then you start to change the mindset. And they start thinking, and they're not just thinking about money. They're thinking about, well, pride in my workmanship. If I'm sending something that needs repairing 5 steps down the thing, that's affecting me. How can I be proud of doing that? In fact, I should be ashamed, really, of sending something down that's not right, and someone else has got to fix it. But that's just one. The pride and the shame thing is just one thing, and so you start to get them to think differently, and then from then on, I'm not sort of talking about the tools, because when I was doing this with Sid, this was in 1989, so we're going back a few years now, and this was before he did his very successful TV series, Sid's Heroes, and his book. If anybody's never read that, it's worthwhile reading, because these techniques, not in finite detail, because it's a book, show exactly what he did and what he attempted to do in 5 or 6 different companies. And it wasn't called lean then. The word lean had never been used. So I think the first documented was something like 1991, when it was actually appeared in a PhD paper that some guy had written in the States, and he called what we're talking about now lean. But this is really referring to probably what became the TPM, the Toyota production system, which everybody talks about, of course. And so Lid never called it, it wasn't called lean.
Yeah.
But it was lean. And so all the tools that everyone talks about now probably had different names, but they were there in terms of, I've got photographs of within 4 weeks of foremen and managers on the shop floor with Ishikawa diagrams, cause and effect, fishbone diagrams, on boards with the guys on the workers on the shop floor, standing there looking at the problem and then the cause and effect. And this was been 4 or 5 weeks after we did this. So and now that was just simply called a cause and effect diagram as part of a continuous improvement program or a waste elimination program. Kaizen, and we explained what Kaizen meant, improving goodness. And when you start talking to them and you get them over 2 days, and then you throw in a few problems. Well, look, we've got a problem. The guy in the fettling shop says this and everything, and so and he says it's a problem it's caused in the core shop, and there's some of them in the core shop there, and he says, well, why is it causing a problem? Well, because, and they explain the problem he's got, and the core maker or the molder or the fettler, whatever, they can put it right. Not the managing director who walks around every day being polite, morning, morning, morning. And he says that just because that's what managing director, but he ain't really interested in, because if anyone says, oh, I've got a problem. Oh, fine, yeah, but I'll send Billy down. He'll have a word with you about that. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. Off as fast as you can go, because they don't want to talk about it, don't want to make the decisions. And so the guys knew it, and it's like they go, oh, and it don't cost them anything to make it right. They don't have to work any harder. They just have to be diligent, and they just have to think about the consequences of what they're doing when they say, oh, it'll be all right. They can fix it in the fettling shop, or they can fix it. Well, they can, but that takes huge amounts of money. Fixing things, repairing things, having to remake them. And then we start talking about the costs of doing all this. And then, because we normally had an accountant there, and they're talking about overhead recovery and all this. But no, this is what we're paying, because, if we pay for all the material to make something and then it's scrapped, it's not just, oh, we're scrapping that, whatever it is. It's all the labor that's gone into it. It's all the electricity. It's all, and these guys could give them the numbers. And then the people are, wow, you see? And then, so this is where the money goes. This is why we can't keep giving you more and more and more money, because we're throwing it away on all these other things just to get whatever we get out of the door at the end of the day. Yeah. So then we start to talk about the techniques then of how we can do it, regular meetings, visual management, getting some charts up there, showing what's going on, being open and transparent in terms of telling the company, telling the worker how much money we're making. Not only tell them when we've lost money, because that's what you normally do. You better get everybody together. We've had a bad month again now. And then it's a bollocking, look at what's happened here. We did this, we did this, we did this, we've lost money. And this is, but they never bring them together and say, right, everybody get together. We've had a fantastic month. We've made £400,000 profit. All our customers are happy. We never tell them that. All we tell them is bad news. I had a huge meeting in South Africa to tell people the good. I thought, it's only bad news these guys get. I had this huge meeting. And South Africa is a very difficult place to manage. That's a subject of another podcast of discussion. But I gave a whole bunch of people good news about how we'd done, and then the meeting, I was so great. And then I was walking out of the meeting, and no one moved. No one. There were supervisors, managers, and I said, "Oh, we're done." Oh, well, then what's the problem? So we were waiting for the bad news. We've never had. Thanks very much, but there must be a catch to this. There's something we're waiting for the left hook coming in now. Yeah. You've shook our hand. Where's the No, I just thought I'd let you know how things are going. There's other things, of course, we've got problems. You know all the problems we've got. You don't need me to stand here and tell you of the problems. You know every problem we've got. You know problems that I don't know anything about. You know where every single problem is. So why do I need to get you together and tell you what the problems are, where we're falling down? The guy in shipping knows how much he's shipping. He can tell me
Yeah.
We're going to have a good week or we're going to have a bad week. He knows that by Tuesday. Why do I need an accountant to tell me that a month later? Oh, you had a lousy week 25. And the shipping guy says, well, I told you that on Tuesday, week 25, but no one asked me. And the inspectors and the quality guys, and they all know, everybody knows. You don't have to tell them. And all this is all about. He's saying, well, come on, tell us. Right, let's sit down and start working through the problems. And that's basically that was the lesson, powerful lesson I learned from Sid. And after that, the transformation we made in that company in terms of, all the areas that we looked, to the extent that I was able in the final year before I left that organization to introduce, because it was a profit share, a profit share scheme. I had agreement with the chairman of the company, who was also the group manager, and it was a big organization. He said, well, I don't want you giving all these people our money. You've got to, and the budgets were always set. They were always real tough budgets. So I'll agree with you, but you've got to hit this budget, and then we can look at sharing it. It wasn't a percentage share or anything like that. I knew what would help me in terms of, and the incentive scheme was on the shop floor as well. It wasn't in the offices, the admin, and all the rest of it. And I knew what sort of level would make them think it's worthwhile, because it's no good saying, we'll do all this and then we'll give you, £25 bonus.
Yeah.
We think, well, no, because if we're trying to save overtime to reduce costs, 25 quid, I earn that on a Saturday morning, and I get it. And if I work Sunday, it's 50 quid because it's double time. So why should I work? 25 quid's nothing. And I tried to, I made it significant. I said, look, this is the budget that we've got to achieve. And I'm going to tell you every single month how we're doing, even though you probably all know in terms of if it's going to be good or bad. But I'll tell you every month how much money we've made, at the profit level we've made, and how much is accruing in the pot. So number one was we had to achieve the budget that had been the corporate budget, and that was the starting point. And so, and it started off. Obviously we got pretty close to budget or just under, and we were looking at, well, why haven't we done it? Why didn't we do it? And then the interest then, when they trust you, see, when you talk to them, and they know that you're not conning them, that you're not trying to cheat them. It's called respect and trustworthiness, and that's all you really need. And so I used to spend a lot of time going through, and people would come in during the week and, this has just gone wrong now, and if we'd done this and if we'd fixed this, because it happens every 3 weeks, the same thing, and it's these, and this is the feedback you get, and they get really upset then if you don't do anything, because it's like, hey, come on, you've got, they put pressure on the management, and this is where you get the big issue in the middle with all the managers who've been doing it this way forever, and suddenly their feet are held to the fire by the guys saying, hey, come on, get this fixed, come on, and then this is where, we don't want any more of this, we don't want this, and they're the ones that you've got to watch. They're the ones that will destroy it if you're not careful. They'll work subtly under the radar, putting obstacles in your way, and that's why it's absolutely essential that the top guy is 100% on. If he's not, it will not work, because the middle management will destroy it. So unless the CEO, the boss, or whoever it is actually 100% committed, and that's why so-called lean initiatives fail. You'll get, an MD or a CEO seeing a presentation. Oh God, I got to do that. Lean. Oh yeah, right. Get us some consultants in. Okay, yeah. Now listen. I want you to do lean. Can you go and do lean for us? Oh yeah, sure, yeah. This is how much it's going to cost. Yeah. And here's the all what we do. Here's the course, and it's all cut and pasted from things they've done before, and it looks good. They got little sketches and things, workers working on. And the MD says, "Oh, brilliant! Go and do it. Go and do it." And it don't work. It doesn't. I mean, everyone gets fired up, particularly at the shop for low level, and then after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, they say, "Hey, nothing's changed. Yeah. Nothing's changed at all. We're still being stopped from doing what this guy came in, this consultant, and told us all about this, and it sounded fantastic, but nothing's changed, and that's why it fails." And then lean gets a bad name. The MD says, "Oh, bloody crap! All this stuff about lean and Japanese techniques and all these Japanese words. Bloody hell, it doesn't work. Yeah. Let's get back to plain English and get them in. Bloody get working. Never mind." So that was my lesson. And just with regard to the incentive scheme, at the end of that year, all the people involved in that with the profit share, you want to call it a profit share, but the distribution of the money that we made, they got £750 each. Wow. And that was in the financial year, April 1990 to April 1991, or it may have been the year before that. It was certainly after I did all my work with Sid Johnson. Yeah. It finished in like September 1989, so it would have been the first full financial year after that. Yeah. And then I was asked by the company to go over to because we had operations in the United States, and I left that company and I went to work in the United States, and then subsequently left the company completely and started working for a large US corporation. My wife was over there, the kids still were at school in the United States. We lived just outside, we lived in Toledo, Ohio for a period of time, and then we moved to Chicago. And then I started working for a very large American organization. We could say, in a way, that's the next phase. So
yeah, before we talk about the next phase, how did you change following, I guess, Sid's intervention with you? What did you do different following Sid's intervention versus what you did before?
I became a lot more tolerant. It's difficult to, if you in your working life, if you've been brought up as an apprentice and you're in a situation where if something goes wrong, you're shouted at all the time. That becomes the norm. And then you move up a bit and you may become the foreman yourself one day. And you think that's the way, that's what happens. If something goes wrong, you shout at your people, you get angry and you shout. And that's an interesting fact. And this was going back in the 80s when this one came up, that 62% of people who were abused in childhood go on to be abusers themselves. Now, I'm not just talking about sexual abuse. I'm talking about being severely disciplined, being smacked by your parents, being shouted at, being deprived, being locked in cupboards, all the horror stories that you hear. Yeah. That as adults, 62% of them do it to their own children. Now, wouldn't you think that was impossible? Wouldn't you think that being brought up in that situation, you would never, ever, ever abuse anyone yourself? Yeah. Because you would understand. But it's almost like a conditioning. And it's like, well, this is the norm. this is the way it is. This is what happens. And a lot of that actually comes over into industrial relations and into supervision and management and leadership. And this is, very much highlighted in a certain way in the book I mentioned before, the human side of enterprise, that people form a view of people, that people don't want to work, they're lazy, they only work because they have to work. If they can avoid work, they will work. And so that's, therefore, if people are like that, you've got to behave in a certain way to those people to make them. And that's, so it's discipline, it's incentive schemes, it's firing people, it's dispute procedure, all that is to make people, because they don't want to work. But it's not the case, is it? Because, so when is that transition made? If you are like that now, if I'm like that with my people, and then suddenly, and I believe that, and then I start my own business, and I'm working 80 hours a week, worrying, not sleeping, have you made a transition from being that type of attitude is called theory X? Suddenly, then, when I'm doing it for my own, suddenly I've transitioned. But only me can transition. All those other people are still exactly the same, lazy, idle, they don't want to work. So that fascinates me. That's one of the things that I've never really got right down to the bottom of yet. And so I was tainted by this to a certain, I mean, quite often I'd revert to type, if you want to call it type, and say, not having that from this guy, no. And I've made some, there are things that I regret in my life that I've done to people. And I wish I could go back and undo it, but you can't. Not a huge amount. And so I think, to me, what it was I had to become more tolerant, and so many times in this, it's not simple, this. Well, it is simple. It's very simple, but it's not easy, because it's so easy to say, God, get him. He's done this or they've done that, and think, what can I do? What can I do to punish them about, And so and that's a human response, and it takes a lot of time. And that's one of the things that I got out from all the work that I did. I became more I got to count to 10. Right.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Right. Shall we talk about the fourth stage?
So yeah, the fourth stage, if we want to call it that, was I was over in the United States. I was living there because of the involvement with my previous company, when I was again approached by a very, very large American group. It was called NACO. NACO, that stands for National Castings. And the reason that I was called in was because this was 1993, was it? 1993, and the Mississippi River had flooded. And it was a huge, huge flood. I mean, at some points, the Mississippi River was 14 miles wide, and mass devastation. And this particular company knew me. The chairman of the company, a guy called Joe Sayer, had known me for, had heard about me, and apparently told me he'd been following me. I don't know what that means, following me for several years. And actually, I met him for the first time in Toledo. He was driving through and he wanted to have a chat with me. And so I met him. That was in the May of 1993. And he was a great guy. And then in June, I think it was June or July, June or July, that's when the Mississippi flooded. And he called me and said, look, we've got massive problems, Jim. One of the plants has been completely inundated with water on the side, Keokuk, Iowa, right on the side of the Mississippi River. and it's under 14 foot of water. And we've got all our customers that we've got working that plant are screaming, they're behind on the deliveries, etc., etc. And he said, so what I've done, I've organized a whole diving company to come in, and we know roughly where things are, but these divers are going down with the big helmets on and everything, air pipes, and they're just putting chains around because they can't see anything. It's completely black, muddy water. But we lower them down because we know the area, and then they're just wrapping chains around anything they find, and then we hoist it up, and we don't know what we're getting, and then we put it. We've got the big barges and things, and then we move it over to the side. And he said, but the plant's completely, and I've got to get all this work finished, and I can't do it anywhere else. But I've got a plant in Chicago, in Cicero. That's a real tough area as well, Cicero, Illinois. And that's where Al Capone's from. And so he said, what I want you to do, if you join me, I want you to go over there to Cicero. And when the plant stops at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm shipping over at the beginning of the week, I don't know, there must have been like 3 coach loads of guys coming over from Keokuk, Iowa. Now, Keokuk, Iowa's out in the boonies. It's like, you know, it really is the, not hillbilly country, but very rural. And all these guys used to come over on a Monday, and then when this big plant in Cicero stopped at 2 o'clock, all these guys then went into the plant, took over all the equipment in the plant, and started to finish off all this work that was coming over from by truck from Iowa. Worked through the night until 6 o'clock in the morning when the day shift started in the normal production in the plant, and then they all went to bed, and he said, I need somebody who can organize all this. He said, because the supervision and the management down there don't want, as far as they're concerned, this is just a bloody problem. They do not want this problem. Yeah. And so I need someone completely independent who's got some common sense and who can do this. And he said, I'm sure that you can. Would you do it? So I said, yeah, sure, I'll have a go. And that was the start of my career, and probably the job that really I enjoyed best. I wouldn't say it wasn't the most rewarding job I had. I don't mean financially in terms of good feelings, but it was the best job I ever had. It was a great company. I mean, Jose was basically the owner of the company. And so we got over this, we got all these things, we eventually sorted out. The river went down, they cleaned the plant out, and everything went back to normal. And he said, will you join us full time? So I said, I would love to do, yeah. And so really, there again, it wasn't, and I didn't really put a lot of my, you want to call it expertise, industrial relations or whatever, into this next phase of my life, but I learned a hell of a lot. And so I was given the title of corporate business director of corporate business development or something like that. And really, I mean, the first sort of phase was going around the different plants that they had, because it was a big Mexico, several plants in Canada, in the United States, Canada. We were involved with the early stages of China, so it was a big operation. But what he wanted more than anything was to establish a European division or a business. So he said, you know, you're the guy to do this, obviously, because you got all this experience and you know all about the jobs in Leeds and Topperton and everything else. He'd obviously done a lot of research on me, I guess. And he said, so I think you're the ideal guy to set up our business in Europe. So can you get on with it? And it was like, oh, right. And we didn't have anything. The only thing we had in Europe, classed as Europe, was a licensee in the UK, and it was the old BSC, British Steel Corporation, who used to make products. The products that we made were all for the railway industry. Yeah. They were bogies. We made wheels, cast steel wheels, side frames and bolsters. These are the bogies systems that go on the freight wagons, the wheels and the axles and all that. Bit couplers, huge business. I mean, at our peak, we were making 1,000 tons of steel castings a day.
Wow.
So you can imagine this was a big operation. That's anybody from the foundry industry who's listening to this will say, wow, 1,000 tons a day. So it was big, many sites. And so I got stuck in sorting, this business, this European business. And so there was one or two companies that had been in trouble, and they contacted Joe, and Joe said, we need to go and talk to them. And basically what we started to do, we made some acquisitions then, started making acquisitions in Europe. So we bought a plant in the UK, in England. We got a plant in Scotland. We bought a plant in Portugal, in Lisbon, Portugal. These were manufacturing plants to start, replicating the work that was being done in the States. It wasn't all railway. There was also what we call floor products. We used to make a lot of valves and pumps, components, castings for valves and pumps. And so we started to make these acquisitions and put these companies together. And then we opened an office in Sweden, in Germany, Czech Republic, and we put all this together then as a group. And I became the group managing director for this division. And so the problem was then I was involved in everything. So I was technical, sales, not doing it all myself, but I was everything was my sort of. I wasn't just looking at operations where I'm really more comfortable with. So, and product development. And so the individual companies that we're buying already had their own management structures and way of doing things and managing directors. And you know what I'm going to say next? It's like, oh my God, because some of these were extreme Theory X guys. Some of them were okay. You got the whole problem with the middle management and the workers, and I knew we could do so much better because in terms of deliveries, meeting deliveries and quality of things. But I was more or less, again, I was right in the middle of a whole firefighting situation, and it was the best job I had in terms of the way I felt about things, because it was a fantastic company to work for, brilliant company to work for. But the frustration was not being able to do, because I couldn't be everything to everyone. Portugal, completely different culture in Portugal. Scotland and England were all not a problem. Czech Republic, and we developed some major suppliers in the Czech Republic. They were extreme Theory X guys, because they're former communists, and that was it was people just didn't. People were there to do what they were told to do, and etc. And that was a real, big issue. There was none of the things that I talked about and was interested in would be what that was being completely alien. That was something that came from Mars, and we'd never even been there yet. Well, how's this guy coming back here from Mars with all these ideas? And so it was, but we didn't own those companies. They were major suppliers. And so it was almost impossible to influence the industrial relations, etc. But easier, obviously, in England and Scotland. Portugal, again, was difficult because the situation in Portugal is that they come out of the revolution in 1974 after a complete dictatorship, the Salazar dictatorship. And the communists actually had power in Portugal for the first 2 years after the revolution. And of course, everything changed in terms of the whole balance from in terms of the power of the people, from having nothing now. And it was very, very difficult because then the communists, I think, not infiltrated, but were a major and integrated part of the trade union movement. And that was very difficult because it was completely political. It was nothing to do with bringing people in and letting them enjoy the work and doing all this. It was absolutely, communism.
Yeah.
And everything that management want to do is bad. Everything should be nationalized. Everything should be the people should control it. We don't want managers. We don't want owners, everything. And so that was difficult. That was difficult. And I didn't really make all that much progress there. Because the MD was of the same thought, you know. He was from the ruling classes, and he said, "No, you can't do it. This doesn't work with people. No. The people, you know, they'll stab you in the back." And so that was, and all that sort of took place between. I started doing that in 1974, and as I say, I didn't have a great deal of influence in terms of, well, not influence, yes, but success in terms of getting the whole organization to work the way I wanted it to do. But I learned a hell of a lot in terms of the different cultures and the way that people reacted differently in say, in Portugal and Scotland and England and the Czech Republic and Germany and Sweden. I mean, I really enjoyed the work I did in Sweden. And they're very enlightened and switched on in Sweden. And so that really was the sort of, that you can almost say that was the fourth phase, and I've got like one final bit really. And that all came to an end just after the Twin Towers, after the attack in New York. There was a period of, they didn't go into a full-blown recession in the United States, but there was a massive downturn in business. And the company ended up in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, mainly because of the huge debts that it had. And it was, and then eventually it went into full, what they call a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is what we would normally call bankruptcy. And so the whole thing collapsed. It was taken over by a private equity company. And they asked me if I would stay on running the European part of the business because they bought that. And then I did that for maybe 12 months or so, and then they decided they were going to sell that business to another private equity company. And you know, it's like these guys, you know, the private equity model is basically you buy a company, you load it up with debt. The debt you put in, you take out as a dividend and put that in your back pocket. And then the company, basically 65% of private equity investments end up in bankruptcy after they've taken out a bunch of money. And so I did that till about 2005. And then I started my own bit. I thought, enough of all this. I started my own business. But it wasn't in industrial relations and training or anything like that. It was we developed new products for the railway industry, and we were very, very successful in terms of the work that we did in the UK with rail track as it was then, Network Rail now, and a lot of the railway wagon builders when they were rebuilding all the infrastructure and everything. So, and that was very well. I enjoyed that. That was a new phase in terms of being involved in, you know, in product development, sales and marketing and promotion and all the rest of it. And I really enjoyed that. And then, and then what happened, I was then bought, a little company was bought by another American company. And so I then started working again for an American company, but I remained in the UK. In fact, I was living in Cardiff then. And then I moved back to Portugal because I lived in Portugal off and on now for 22 years.
Right.
So so then what happened after that is then the American company that bought my company, and it sounds grand, but it wasn't. It was a very small company I had, and everything I made, everything I did, and this was the problem I had, was all subcontracted.
Yep.
Now, when you do that, if you've got very, very high margins, it's fine. But when you're in a very competitive market and you subcontract all your manufacture, all the different things that go into making undercarriage systems for railway wagons or whatever, every company you're working with or who's supplying is making a profit. If you've got your own manufacturing facilities, that's not the case. You manufacture your goods, you sell it, and hopefully you make a profit. But
Yeah.
when you've got 10 suppliers and they're all making a profit, and then you put it all together and you want to sell it, there's nothing left unless you're Apple, and that's a completely different ballpark. I mean, Apple make virtually everything in China for peanuts and sell it to the rest of the world for coconuts. I mean, that's the difference, isn't it? It's a peanut and it's a coconut.
Yeah.
That's why they make so much money. But they're very few and far between. Manufacturing, on the shop floor, nuts and bolts, you can't do that because it's competitive. And so it was always just on the margin. And then this American company was taken over by an even bigger American company. And they said, we're doing all this work with this guy, Jim, over there in Europe. And we're not making, we're only making a tiny amount of margin because he's making, he makes everything outside. They never had the manufacturing facilities. And so they had the manufacturing facilities, but they weren't geared up to the manufacturing, the processes and the techniques that we wanted in Europe. So that eventually, well, in fact, I left. I think that's the only time in my life I've been fired.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it was the American company. Well, I mean, fired in terms of I didn't like what they offered, so they said, goodbye. And that was sort of so I'd not done the things I really wanted to do all the time, although I'd really learned a lot. And so this was then, we were now by this time into the mid 20s. It was probably it was 2009 when I left the company. And then I did some terrible work. I hate using this word. I did some consultancy work.
Yeah.
I had to advertise myself as a consultant. And so I did quite a bit of work on that. But then again, this was where the missing thing was. You went in and you talked to someone and said, you can have. And so it was sort of, you were consulting, you weren't doing anything. That's why I call myself now a do-sultant. You weren't really doing anything. It was part of, well, almost sketching out something that you didn't really control. You did it, you put it all together, and this is what you should do. And then you walked away.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, even though it didn't work, a lot of the things that I didn't take on and didn't work. And no one ever called me back and said, "You're bloody useless. It didn't work." And I thought, this is like weird. And I did quite a bit. And some of the things I did were successful, but the majority weren't. Not because of me, because they just didn't do it afterwards. But if a consultant comes in, then and the consultant goes, who's there to do it? Is it the manager who didn't know anything about it in the first place, or the guys on the shop floor? And it just doesn't work. The consultancy just doesn't work. But no one ever called me and said, "You're useless."
Yeah,
it didn't work. What a bloody waste of time that was. And that was the message to me as well.
Yeah.
And then, this is the final thing, and I hope we have enough time to finish this off. We can call it phase 5, which was my sort of towards the end of my full-time working life, if you want to put it that way. I got a call from another headhunter who said, "Jim, we've got a problem. I've got a client in South Africa, and he's got massive problems, and he's looking for someone like you to come and help him with his problems." And I said, not interested at all. I've never been to South Africa, and I've been all over the place. Never been to South Africa, but I have this vision of South Africa, and, but I suppose people have never been, have got this weird country with violence and all the rest of it. And I said, no, I'm not interested. And he pestered me a couple of times, and it all went quiet. And I got a call and said, "Jim, look, would you please meet with these people from South Africa?" They were part of they were owned by Anglo-American. Massive company. And so I said, "Yeah, okay." So, well, you have to come I was in Portugal. So you'll have to come up to London. They want to meet you in their headquarters in London. So, okay, I went up there. And then it was a big, like a Zoom call, but it was sort of a teleconference with this huge screen that covered the whole wall. It was amazing. And the people from the company I went to, they started outlining all these problems they had, you see. And I'm listening to this, thinking you've got this all wrong. These aren't the problems, because, you know, our people are no good. They're unskilled. We need to improve them. Absentees and all these issues that we need a manager to come in and sort out. The quality's bad. All this. I'm thinking, no, the problem they've got here really is it's simple. It's an industrial relations problem. It's not incompetence.
Yeah.
So I listened to them and I said, and then I agreed. I said, okay, I'll come over, but only for 6 weeks. That was the sort of time scale I put on being able to help them in what they thought the problems were.
Yeah.
So I went over and did the 6 weeks, and then, well, I was doing the 6 weeks, and they kept going and talking to me, and they said, you've got to make a presentation to the board of directors, and this is a big company. I mean, 8,500 people, into all sorts, making, well, I don't want to go into all the details because I'll tell you it is and I'll get into trouble, but you can work it out if you look at my profile. And so they thought I was going to give them this big presentation about quality and this, you know, improving the technology and this and all that way. And I said, well, and I just did just one page, and I put it on a PowerPoint. And when they saw PowerPoint come up, they thought they were all, okay, stop. I'm thinking, when they get this power, it was only one page. And it was like page one, and they knew there was no more pages to this. And so I just listed out the issues. And I said, basically, the problem you've got here has got nothing to do with all these so-called technical problems, skill problems, and all the rest of it. It's your industrial relations. And we've not got enough time to go into all the details, but South Africa is unique in terms of, currently I would say unique in terms of its industrial relations. Of course, all stemming back from its origins in apartheid and what happened after apartheid, and what's happened since in terms of the consistent government of the ANC since 1994 to where we are now. And basically, it was all the things that I'd seen all my life. Because the majority of the supervision were white, and you think, oh well, the white. But in South Africa, white just doesn't mean white. You've got what the class as the old colonial whites, and then you've got the Afrikaner, and they're two different. And that history goes back to the Boer Wars and all the rest of it. And then you've got the black, and it's not, and this is not, these are not racist comments, but even on official government statistics, you have to do every month. The companies have to put down the number of black male employees, the number of black female employees, the number of coloured male employees, and the number of coloured female employees, and then the number of Asians, and then how many of those have got disabilities, and so if you talk about black and coloured in South Africa, it's perfectly normal. It's not like, oh, you can't say that, that's a racist comment. It's within the official, right? So it's not got to be taken as a racist comment. I mean, they now sort of lumped it all together. Then it's called they refer to them as, oh, they are HDSAs. And I'm thinking, what the hell's an HDSA? And they're talking about people. And I said, well, what's an HDSA? Oh, well, historically disadvantaged South Africans. And there was a lot within the company that fell into this. I mean, all sorts of problems. I mean, 25% of the workforce, that's of the workers, of the employees, were HIV positive, for instance.
Yeah.
And that has a whole lot of issues with it. But it was the way they were being treated. They weren't unskilled. I mean, these were all the people were basically time served. They were apprentice trained people. But you got 11 official languages in South Africa, and these were like tribal, the different tribes, the Zulus, Xhosas, etc. And you had that. So there was 11 official languages on all the forms. There was that number of people, the different groupings in the company, but the majority were either Zulu or Xhosa, and they didn't really get on well together. Historical conflicts from the end of apartheid when they fought each other. I mean, the ANC and the Inkatha movement, they were killing it. They were fighting. There were battles in the factory that I was running where people were shot from cranes with guys with, it was unbelievable, the stories I heard about this. And so it's all against this background. And they still felt disadvantaged. And so me coming along and saying, right, guys, this is what, because I agreed to work for them full time. So they appointed me head of became the head of the whole division. And so then I got started. But it was, with 1,800 people in different sites. And I started on the main site first. And I did a whole solid 5-day program. Exactly along the lines that I'd done with previously and the work I'd done with Sid. I started going through the whole thing in exactly the same format. Unbelievable. I mean, when I first went in there and I walked through the plant, not one person would look at me. I'd walk up to people and they'd immediately, look down or pretend they were doing something. Because I was, I was a manager. I was like the top guy. They knew that by this time. So they just didn't want to interact. It took me 3 months just to get, and by that time, everyone spoke to me. I knew where all the little cubby holes where they used to go having their breaks, and I'd go in. I knew where they were having, legitimate breaks. I'd just like knock on the door and go in, and I say, any chance of a brew? Come on, right? And they were like, they look at each other like this, and someone say, yeah. And I just sit down and have a chat. No, just having a chat, not saying, why are you in here drinking tea? Because it was legitimate anyhow.
Yeah.
Just, how are you doing? How's it going? What do you know? And not promising anything, not giving anything, just talking to people. And I eventually got the whole organization would say hello to me. They'd come up, morning, Mr. Jim, and they'd shake your hand. And I was 60 odd then, and I had white hair. And the one thing that they recognize and age, if you're old and you've got grey hair and you're wise, and there's a great deal of respect for elder people, much more than you see anywhere else. Very, very respectful. And when elder people are respectful back, that's all you need.
Yeah.
And so I did a huge amount of things there in South Africa in terms of involving the people and continuous improvement programs and helping out with plant layouts, reorganizing layouts, and then eventually I left at the end when I came back in 2013. Yeah, 2013.
Right.
And so that was a repeat basically of what I'd done in Leeds. And I left it in a much, much better situation. But now they're struggling again. I mean, South Africa's struggling. I mean, the official unemployment rate's 35%. And it's a lot higher than that. You've got, the problems I got involved with, you've got one worker's wage would be looking after, like, I think the average was 6 people. So one wage was supporting 6 people.
Wow.
And the plant, I was in Johannesburg, which is not really typical of South Africa. Yeah. And so a lot of them were migrant workers. They came in from the rural areas, and they came into work, and then they go home at Christmas, which was the big holiday because it was the middle of summer there. And you got all the problems of of where people lived, and in the townships that they were still living in, and people working nights who couldn't sleep during the day because, I mean, they're basically living in what we would say a tin, corrugated roofs and walls, and massive, massive problems. But oh boy, how rewarding was that? That was the most rewarding period of my life. I felt, and I still feel today, and I'm still in contact with it, and I do some, I'm not going to call it consultancy work, but people that I work with call me and say, I'm going to do things like I have a Zoom call now, and we'll talk about things, and they'll bring the managers in or whatever, and we talk about it and explain things. So I'm still doing a little bit of that, but not a great deal. And it's all, I don't charge for any of that. It's all, I just do it, But it's the proudest, honestly. It was almost, to me, it was almost like the culmination of everything I believed in and done over the years. And it came with that I can make a massive, massive impact.
I love that.
Massive.
I love that. Hey, the boy from Charlie's not done so bad for himself, has he?
He's not done bad, has he, leaving school with a 1 level in woodwork and not very good school reports. No, I've done okay.
Yeah, no, you have, and I'm conscious of the time I've taken out of your morning today. I've got a couple of quick questions. If you had a choice, Jim, of taking your knowledge that you've got now and starting your career again, or having the lived experience that you've had, which would you do? Would you rather start the way you started with what you knew and then learn it as you've done, or take your brain from now and start with what you know?
I would definitely take my brain. I wouldn't want to go through 60 years of learning it all again.
Yeah.
Because I've been working for 60 years. I would love to have another 60. I'd love to have another 60 years in. I did one of these strength finder. I was going to do some work for PwC. I'm not an accountant or anything like that, but they had a lean division consult. I mean, and I had to do. They wanted me to do strength. It was called a strength finder. You have to do and answer all these questions, and then you get a report back. And mine was, the number one thing was futuristic. And I never thought about myself as being futuristic organizer and all this sort of thing. And so I read all about it, and it was absolutely, it was part of how the hell. It was absolutely spot on. And I'm thinking, if you ever looking at any of my posts and things I do on LinkedIn, why I want another 60 years, and I'm not going to get it. I'm 73 now, but I'm fit and I'm healthy and I keep out, I'm active and all the rest of it. And I only feel like I'm 20, and I feel like I'm in my mid-20s all the time. That's the problem. But the knees don't say that. And they say, no, you're not. But my big thing at the moment is that there's 3 things that I would really, absolutely, desperately love to get involved with now. One is the development and introduction of nuclear fission reactors, because I think this is where it's going to go, and this will be significant. All 3 things significant in terms of UK manufacturing. Secondly, would be the development and manufacture of desalination plants, thinking out of the box, not just taking the typical things that they do now. And then the third thing is the electrolysis of seawater to produce hydrogen, because electrolysis and desalination are energy intensive. We can't do it. We just haven't got enough, and we cannot do it, not enough energy. There's a plant on the Thames estuary, a desalination plant. It's a reverse osmosis plant, but it costs 250 million. It can make 400,000 litres of fresh water a day. And it's not working because they can't afford to run it because of the power it needs. And there's some technical problems. And I think the major manufacturers of desalination plants and electrolysis plants are all in Germany. Why is everything always in Germany?
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
on. The Industrial Revolution started it. We did everything. In 1852, in the United Kingdom, we made 90% of everything that was manufactured in the world was made here in 1852. And that's when the Theory X and X management ideas started, when we got people off the land and put them in factories. Yeah. And it's taken all this time to change it. And I think I'm an ambassador for change. But if I could be involved in this in the future, because those three things would unlimited power, completely total green power, not with all the problems of fission reactors with radioactive waste and all that stuff. And it's happening. It's happening now. I'd love to get involved with that. Desalination would provide, this is of seawater, 9/10 of the Earth's surface is water. Salt water, we can't use it. Desalination would provide water,
yeah,
if you had, with insufficient quantities, if you had the power and the plants to do it, for the entire world. Wow. We could irrigate. We have no water problem anywhere in the world. No one would go hungry. We could start reversing the problems of the damage that we've done to our planet. We could irrigate land. We could change from meat-based protein to vegetable-based protein. We can do all that if we have the water. If we don't have it, we can get it. It's not a problem. And with regard to hydrogen, they're the same again. I stand when I go to Portugal or when I'm going down to the beach, I look and I say to her, and she keeps saying, oh, not again. I said, just look at all that fuel. Just look at all that. We can burn that as far as the eye can see. And you go on a boat, even across the Bay of Biscay from Southampton to Santander, you can't see anything. All you can see is water. Yeah, so all you can see is water everywhere. And that water is all it is hydrogen and oxygen. And so, but it's very, very energy intensive to split it. If we had cheap, low cost, plentiful or limitless energy, and it's got to be nuclear energy because it can't be wind and sun. They're supplements, but absolute base load, absolutely guarantee you can get it when it's raining, windy, it's dark, it's light. It's got to be nuclear. And just imagine if you could the energy and fuel in the sea. From that we can get all the fresh water we need for the entire planet, and all the energy that we need in terms of, and it's green energy. The only green hydrogen energy is through electrolysis of water, because hydrogen produced from oil, the byproduct of that, of course, is carbon anyhow. And the benefits of this in terms of our country, we could become completely self-sufficient again with limitless energy and fuel and water. I mean, we could rejuvenate our manufacturing industry. We could become the world leaders in the manufacture and supply of fusion reactors, of desalination plants, of electrolysis plants. We've got the talent we have in this country and the people that we produce. You're not telling me that we can't develop a better mousetrap than the ones that we've got now, because as far as I can see it, there's not been a great deal of continuous improvement and product improvement in the equipment that's available now. Basically, there's no incentive. Why would you spend and develop a huge electrolysis plant if no one can afford to run it, and if it won't, no one will buy it? We've got one on the Thames. Okay, it's a desalination plant. It's not running. And I've just been told today I've got a hosepipe ban. I'm supplied by Thames Water. It's on bloody Thames. It's on the River Thames. Okay? Yeah. And Thames Water, you've got to go a hosepipe ban with short of water. No, you have a plant there that can produce, it's only a small plant, 400,000 litres of water a day. And you can't run it. It breaks down. Come on.
What keeps you going, Jim? What keeps you going? Because you're very passionate when you talk, and you've got all of this energy. What is it that's feeding you?
I don't know. I've got a fantastic family. You know, I don't talk a lot about my wife because I try to keep my wife separate from my business. So, but my wife is absolutely, she's supported me throughout my life. She's a Westmoreland girl. She's from Kendal. We got married in 1970. Well, we met in 1970. We got married in 1974. I've got 2 daughters. I've got 5 grandsons, and I look at my grandsons, and I look at what's going on, and I mean, this to me has been a wake-up call these last 2 years of with COVID and the pandemic and the lockdowns and the shutdowns and working from home and the complete deterioration that's now taken place in services. I mean, I'm appalled, absolutely appalled at what's going on now with regard to public services, and not entirely with what's going on with regard to the present round of industrial disputes. I mean, Ross says, well, you ought to get in there and get working with that lot, get that lot sorted out. Well, yeah, it is, but it's the remnants of, it's almost to a certain extent, the revenge of from the factory. There are certain elements within the trade union movement which are purely political. Anybody with half a brain knows that we've got to make concessions and changes to practices that started in terms of the railway unions in the steam age. Some of those agreements that are still working to were signed in the steam when we had driving steam locomotives, and they ended in 1968.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be. Sometimes I think I just want to get in there, and I can help, and that's what I'm never going to do it. They'll never let me near anything like this again, I don't suppose, because it's vested interest in it all that. But I know, I'm so frustrated. I know what we need to do. I know absolutely, without any shadow of a doubt, we've got to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels because we don't have any, or very little left. When a country like ours, where it's pouring down most of the time, and now we're short of water after 4 or 5, well, we've not had rain for about 6 weeks. It's pouring down now, actually. But, and that, when you think that Thirlmere was built by the Victorians up in the Lake District,
yeah,
and the water from Thirlmere runs to Manchester, and there's not a single pump.
Right.
It runs all the way from Thirlmere to Manchester under gravity. These were the Victorian engineers that didn't have AutoCAD and CADs and computers and all the things that we've got now. And they did that. And this is, and now here we are with all the advantages that we've got now, all things we can do now. And we've got a bloody plant on the Thames that can make water, and it's just accepted. Oh, it's too it's too expensive to run. Oh, we've got a maintenance problem with the filters, and I can't accept this.
Yeah.
I get that plant running in a month.
Yeah.
I would. I'd get that plant running in a month without any problem at all.
Yeah. No.
And that's what drives me on. But just knowing but it's very frustrating. Because I'm not working like full time anymore, and I don't want to be in the middle of it in one company, and I don't really. I'll help anybody that wants any help in terms of the techniques of what they want to do, how they can do it, what they can achieve, as long as they're committed to it. I will never ever go to someone and says, can you, oh, we want to do this. You know, we want to do, well, we want to do lean. Can you go and do lean for us? Or because you had a lot of success with it. No, the answer is no. No, not unless you absolutely can convince me that you're willing to do it, that you're willing to, you know, respect your people, talk to your people, take an interest in, you know, in their needs and their problems, and we don't.
Yeah, that has been a theme running throughout this whole conversation, the importance of committed leadership. That's one thing that's come across really, really strongly. That and your passion for what you've done and how you've done it in your journey. I think if people wanted to know more about you, Jim, where would they go? What would they do? What's the best way to find out?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a LinkedIn profile, and I think everything you would need to in terms of contacting me, talking, my phone number is on there, my email address is on there. It's a very, I used to have all pages and pages and pages of what I've done, you know, but I've scrapped all that now. I think I've just got headlines of different places I've worked, and my introduction is about that much. But I've done it, you see. I'm a doer, and I'm really interested in people who want to do things and how you do it. I'm a firm believer. All the problems are in the middle. The problems are in the middle in terms of when you're trying to do these things in the middle management, they're the problem. And then the other problem, and you look at it, you've got the why and the what, or the aim and the purpose, or the mission and the vision. And everybody, but that's not where the problem is. Everybody can do that, because you don't have to do anything about why and what. What do you do? Oh, this is the idea, and this is what, but you don't do anything. That's just words and a dream and an idea. The only thing that matters, the critical thing, is the how and what you do, not what you say. What you do when you walk around and you meet people and you go and talk to your people and you respect people, from the, you know, the humblest person to the, you've just got to be a normal human being. They're all the same. We're born and we die. We need water. We need fresh air. We need shelter. We need, and those are the things that matter. And that's what everyone's aiming for. I mean, Maslow, okay, that so-called hierarchy of needs. By the way, Maslow never ever called it higher. He never called it a hierarchy. He called it steps. And it's very, very, absolutely relevant today. Just have a look at that, but don't think about it being a hierarchy of everybody aiming for this. It's not like that. You can be doing all things at the same time. And then the other thing, if you look at Hertzberg in terms of motivation, look at those motivational factors on Hertzberg. It's everything, every single thing that these guys in South Africa told me would motivate them. And it's all on there. It's not new. It's not new. Really intelligent people have studied this, and they know and they understand it. But we don't do anything about it. We got shelves and shelves of books with all these things, and motivation this and that, and lean, and the machine that changed the world, and the thing. So what? One of the best books I read, without any shadow of a doubt, is McGregor's The Human Side of Enterprise. And I think another one, a very enlightening book, is The Goal. And in terms of theory of constraints, I mean, I know it's, you know, but that is very, very powerful in terms of the two things on it. Theory of constraints, you've really got to understand constraints. And the other one is throughput accounting. Now, forget conventional. Well, you can't forget conventional accounting, because you've got to comply with the rules and the regulations in terms of reporting. But in terms of your factory or your workshop or whatever business you've got, the thing you've got to really understand and start looking at, even if it's like a little mini spreadsheet you do on your own, is throughput accounting. Is looking at the stages and not the conventional. I mean, you can make money, you can make profit without why you're losing money. according to, because what we do something, and then we add, oh, well, it's cost us £5.50 to do that. So that now is worth £65 for material plus £5.50 for the work we do. And then it goes along to the next stage, and somebody else spends an hour on it, and that's another £10.50. And this builds up all the way through. And then I've been in situations where we've had record sales in companies, record sales. And the accountant said, we're not so good last month. What? That's still we are, yeah, but the problem is you reduce the work in progress. Oh, yeah, the work in progress has gone down. The whole bloody value's gone down now in the company. So you've only made whatever, because if you keep adding all these costs on right up until the point you sell it, and then there's 3% left when you sell it, you get that 3% because all the value comes out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But what you've got is cash. So, but we don't consider it because it's all about the bottom line. What is the institutional investors and all the rest of investors in the companies? That's what they're looking at, and they want hard nuts on the top. If you've got someone like me, you say, oh, no, he's weak, he's soft. He talks to the people. We want a nutter. We want somebody who's going to go in there and beat the bastards up when they don't perform and fire them and get. I mean, I've been to companies and I've talked to MDs and in terms of jobs and things, and they'll say, "Well, you've got a challenge here because basically, most of the people we got here are crap."
Yeah.
What? But you employed them.
Yeah.
I know, but there's nobody else. I mean, we can't get anybody else. So you've got a major problem from your straight away because they're bloody useless. They're absolutely useless. This is another thing. Well, you took them on.
Yeah. Honestly, Jim,
there's nobody else available.
This has been hugely, highly entertaining, fascinating, and there's been so much that you've shared in the time that we've had this morning, and so many, I don't know what the right phrase is, but so many nuggets of value that you have shared throughout. But honestly, your passion comes through immensely in your story, your journey, and what is truly important on this quest for improvement. And so we say as a business, as Get Knowledge, myself and Jason, we say that we champion people in the improvement equation, and that's kind of our little strapline. And what you've articulated beautifully through your journey and through your story is just the importance of people and treating people like people. So thank you for that.
Simple but not easy.
Yeah, dead right. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for joining me, and on this 200th episode. And thank you so much for just sharing so openly, candidly, and just honestly your journey and story. So thank you from one Charlie fella to another.
I know how about that, eh? Two Charlians. That's amazing, isn't it? Amazing.
It is. Thank you very much, Jim.
The centre of the universe.
It is indeed. Yeah, that's exactly what I say. Yeah, it is.
The world's university.
Yes, yeah, dead right. Thank you so much, and good luck with everything you've got going on.
Great. Okay, you're welcome. It's been an honour to be on your 200th podcast. I'm honoured for that, and I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Jim.
Thank you very much, and very best of luck. And everybody else is going to listen to this as well.